Hello, and welcome back to Writing Tips. This is the fifth video in the Story Developer series, and I'm your host, Sherry. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the long-standing conflict between writers themselves. Do you like to plan everything out in your story, or do you let the universe dictate what you will write? Then we'll figure out who you're writing for. People who like a lot of action in their stories, or people who just want to bond with the characters, or perhaps the rare individual who likes to be stimulated to think. In fulfilling the task of creating the first draft from nothing, some people prefer to let their deeply ingrained genetic code lead the way. They just write with minimal or no plan. These people who fly by the seat of their pants are sometimes called pantsers. Stephen King, Margaret Atwood, Ray Bradbury, Diana Gabaldon, George R.R. Martin, Mark Twain, Khaled Hosseini from The Kite Runner, and Raymond Chandler are all pantsers. You're like the hare in the proverbial race. We'll create some characters together, and then I'll turn you loose. Just realize you will have to do more work in the editing phase. At that point, the tortoise will catch up to you and may even pass you. On the other hand, some writers stare at the blank page and their minds go equally blank. Don't panic. You're probably a plotter. J.K. Rowling's Joseph Heller from Catch-22, James Patterson, John Grisham are all plotters. You need clear, concise plans so you know what to write next. I'll show you some places to find an outline that might fit your style. You'll have to do some reading and research, but you should end up with a plan for what to write every day. No more being bullied by that bright white paper. Most writers fall into one camp or the other and sing the praises of their choice. Some can't even imagine writing the way the other camp writes. Stephen King is famous for saying outliners are the last resource of bad fiction writers who wish to God they were writing a master's thesis. A. Woods, a prominent speculative fiction author, responded to King's comment by saying, "Muddling your way through the plot as you go is like driving without a map in the dark without high beams. You might get somewhere cool, awesome, new, satisfying. King often does, but you might also end up in the ditch." Life is rarely absolute for any of us. The vast majority of us are neither pantser nor plotter. We are somewhere in the middle. As E.L. Doctorow put it in the Paris Review, writing is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole journey that way. By far, this is the largest group of writers. Most of us plan a little ways ahead and write toward a certain story event. When we get closer to that point, we plan a little further or in more detail. There aren't any commonly used names for writers who start with a vague plan or only plan as far ahead as they need to keep going. I've heard headlighters, plantsers, panty liners, and roadsters. Well, I wouldn't want to be called a panty liner, so I'm using roadster here. That group sounds sort of cool. In addition to E.L. Doctorow, Brandon Sanderson, Jim Butcher, Chuck Wendig are all roadsters. J.K. Rowling considers herself a roadster because she changes her outline so many times as she writes. But let's be honest, she has a 10-column chapter outline. She's a plotter. Pantsers often describe having a greater sense of possibility and freedom within their writing process. A pantser has the same sense of wonder and surprise about the story's trajectory and ending as the reader. That's because pantsers write best in a trance-like state called the zone or the flow. They often feel that they are not the ones creating the story, only taking dictation from the universe. That feeling is often accompanied by a sense of euphoria. Often, pantsers' stories can feel more organic and have unpredictable twists and turns. But with everything, there's a cost. Pantsers tend to struggle with writer's block, and their stories often take much longer to complete, although plotters have to add the time that they take plotting to their writing time, so I think in the long run it's a wash between the two. A pantser has much less certainty about their story's viability going in. The story may go nowhere or be unpublishable upon completion. Because of their more organic nature, pantser stories can also feel meandering and tangential and have uneven pacing. As such, they may require dramatic revision to become anything resembling a real story. If you're a pantser, you're more in touch with the subconscious already, and you probably have an innate sense of story. Here is my advice before I turn you loose with your idea. Pay attention to the next video in this series, when we develop some characters together. The more real your characters are in your mind, the more they will guide you through their lives, and the more real they will feel for your readers. Give your characters free range, and you'll be surprised at what they accomplish on their own. Write, 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 and write some more. You are perpetually courting the muse. Make sure she finds you at your writing desk. Develop a writing routine with a daily word limit, maybe even a ritual to call the muse, or in other words, to let your subconscious know that it's time to write. Write hot. You do your best writing when your idea is fresh and you're still excited about it. That's when it's easiest to get yourself in the zone, where words come freely and unbidden. That's when your subconscious takes the reins and writes things that might even surprise you. The enemy of writing hot is your inner editor. She'll shut your writing down and kick you out of your zone every time. Editing or rewriting is a separate process from drafting the first version. When your inner editor shows up to tell you what you're writing is a waste of time, thank her for her input, but firmly tell her you won't be needing her until the editing phase. Right now, you're just trying to get words on the page for her to edit later. Below this video, in the show notes, you'll find a list of apps to train you to write faster and ignore your inner editor. Also, make sure to sign up for the Fast Drafting course when I have that available. Tickle your muse, or your subconscious, by writing longhand and see if new ideas come that way, or write in different places and at different times of day to see when your writing is the best. Another pantser antagonist is writer's block. Because you don't have a plan for what you're going to write every day, you can run out of ideas. It can feel like the muse is ignoring you. Brainstorming is key to calling the muse. She can't ignore a decent brainstorming session. If you get stuck, consider going back to Capture the Cosmos course or get some other brainstorming books and links. Don't be afraid to write something other than your novel for one day. That can refresh the muse and bring new ideas to go back to your own novel with. My muse recommends Writing Open the Mind by Andy Courtier for those moments when you need some fresh ideas. In this course, follow along with the plotters so you have a working understanding of plot. You don't have to do the exercises, but plot theory is something you will eventually have to address, and you should have a working knowledge of how the elements of story interact to create plot. Follow your muse no matter where she leads you. Being a pantser is more than just laziness or the unwillingness to create an outline. It's about having faith that the universe will eventually give you the right story, the one that needs to be told. Eventually. Pantsers have to be fearless. There may be some blind alleys, but mostly the muse will be well behaved if you dare to become her loyal servant. Stuart Horwitz of the book Architecture Method recently wrote this: "There seem to be two options, self-torture or faith. If I choose self-torture, the activities seem pretty clear. I will measure and stress over quality and pace. I will grasp for ideas whose time has not yet come. I will try to get some unsuspecting beta reader to make me feel better about my progress and eventual destination. If I choose faith, there doesn't seem to be much more to it than this. Sink into the work. Do I know what I'm writing on Tuesday? Do I have a process to capture what announces itself just over the horizon so I know what I'm writing on Wednesday? If so, I have everything I need." Plotters. Plotters often report having a greater confidence level in their stories before they start writing. The plotter's writing process also tends to run quickly and smoothly, although you do have to take into account all the time spent creating a beat sheet. Plotted stories often have a strong, even pacing and narrative momentum. Because you've done some of the structural work before writing, you'll have less editing to do at the back end. However, plotting may feel too mechanical, almost scientific for some writers. After plotting the story, actually writing it can feel like drudgery. Because you are so orderly, plotted stories run the risk of feeling stilted and artificial. I'm going to do a video on character development next. Make sure you pay attention to that and download the character development sheets to start roughing in your characters. Next, you'll need to do a little research. I'll make several suggestions for you, but you will have to decide what type of story you want to write and choose a story structure that's complementary to your content. Then I'll suggest several books you could read to master that structural style. Alternate between character development and plotting. We'll talk about using the snowflake method to build up complexity in layers. Roadsters. In a lot of ways, you have the best of both worlds. You have a plan and can keep the momentum going even during inspirationally dry spells. But your plan isn't so rigid that when an idea hits you from out of the blue, it will mean another month of plotting. You have a loose, flexible plan that can accommodate wonder and surprises. Your stories often have the even pacing of a plotter, while also incorporating the organic feel of twists and turns from the pantser. However, without the near religious faith in the muse of a pantser, the muse might not come to your rescue as obediently. Even with a vague plan, you can still follow a new idea into a corner that you can't escape from. And if you're distracted by every shiny new idea, your story could end up rambling and require a great deal of revision. My advice is to develop your characters. They'll help you through any rough spots. Fill in the simple 4-act plot I gave you last time. If you don't have all the plot points when you start, don't fret. Just start writing from the hook to the inciting incident, and other ideas will likely come to your rescue. Change your outline as needed. If you get an idea for the plot, jot it down in your simple plot outline and then go back to writing. Try to keep the ending in mind. You don't want to write yourself into any corners. Alternate between brainstorming more details for your characters and writing the plot. We'll discuss this more when we discuss the snowflake method. I want to address one other thing before we leave the plots and pants discussion. Let's say you are all the way over on the pantser side, and the thought of plotting makes you a little queasy. What if you did it anyway? Maybe not with your best idea or second best, but maybe with the fourth or fifth best idea. Why would you want to do that? Well, when I was younger, I learned to play the guitar. Like most creative ventures, playing music takes creativity and a whole lot of practice. No one thinks you can play a song on the guitar without practice. Let's face it, your fourth or fifth idea probably won't get used to write a masterpiece. You'll have more better ideas by the time you use up ideas 1 through 3. Why not use up idea number 4 for practice? Plotting practice will seep into your subconscious like muscle memory does when someone is playing a musical instrument. It will make it more likely that what you free write has ingrained structure, even though it isn't intentionally plotted. Same goes for you all the way over on the plotter side of the spectrum. Why not take that fourth or fifth idea, that idea you aren't planning to develop, and give it to the muse? Free write inside that idea for 20 minutes every morning. 20 minutes isn't that much time to lose in a day, and you can use it to warm yourself up for the real writing of the day. Picture your character in the world of this idea and count backwards from 20. Then just see where the character goes. Stretch some of those subconscious muscles. Your real writing is likely to be more imaginative and original as a result. Now, let's move on to talking about your readers. Story is about change. In any story, 3 things can change: the situation, the character, or the meaning of the story. At least one of these things must change for it to even be a story, but more than one or all 3 can exhibit change. Strong narrative arc drives a fast-paced book with lots of tension, but it doesn't demand much from the reader. Since the reader does not have to think about the action, they are less engaged and may not remember the details of the book after they are done reading it. They will only remember they enjoyed it and will likely buy a second book by the same author. Because the reader is less engaged, these books often last on the bestseller list only a few months. Strong character arc drives the reader with strong emotions. These emotions make them more likely to identify with the main character and therefore bond to that character. Because this demands more engagement, the reader is more likely to remember details of the novel. So these novels have a better longevity, sometimes selling well for years. Strong themes demand the most from readers. Readers who like this challenge often like to share thoughts about the books they read, and these novels lend themselves to discussion. When novels like these are well done, They have the greatest longevity and are called classics, like The Great Gatsby and The Grapes of Wrath. In some stories, the characters do not change. Only the situation the character finds him or herself in changes. These stories are usually referred to as narrative-driven or plot-driven. Sometimes they are called commercial or genre fiction, usually with a dismissive curl of the lips. In screenwriting, these are the studio films. In nonfiction, this is akin to narrative nonfiction. The classic example of genre fiction is in the 1950s to 1970s TV series. Gilligan's Island, Bewitched, Star Trek. The situation changed slightly every week, but the characters remained true to themselves. This led to cliché characters and predictable plots, thus the sneer that goes with genre fiction. Yet writing this type of fiction in today's market is just as challenging and complex as writing literary fiction. Modern consumers of genre fiction will no longer allow predictable plots or cliché characters. Writing something unique in a purely narrative plot has become some of the most challenging work today. Stories where the character does most of the changing are called character-driven or literary. In movies, they are the independent films, and in nonfiction, it is sometimes called journalistic. There is more to writing a character-driven story than just planning the change, but that is for another video. Most stories in today's market have some character change as the story unfolds, but by no means are all successful stories required to have a character arc. For those of you who do fix other writers with a stare down the length of your nose, when they tell you that they write thrillers or romance and announce that you only write character-driven literary fiction, consider this. Do you have a cell phone on you right now? Well, that's there because of a 1960s serial that was completely plot-driven. Star Trek inspired the developers of the cell phone, MRIs, and talking computers with voice recognition. Working! What has pure character-driven story where nothing happens externally but all the action is in the dramatic, heart-wrenching change in the character ever inspired? Nothing. Nothing. Because nothing external changes. So get off the genre people's back. Everyone has the right to write what they love and not to feel bad about it. In truth, this discussion about character versus narrative-driven plot is somewhat in jest. The argument is outdated. There is almost no pure character-driven fiction being consumed anymore, and purely narrative fiction is not as common as it used to be. Most modern fiction, even TV serials, contain elements of both narrative and character arc. The consumers of modern fiction almost demand it. This year's action movies like Jurassic Park and John Wick are heavily weighted to the narrative arc, while Wicked documents how Oz's two leaders went from best friends to antagonists, and House of the Dragon documents how and why two best friends changed to mortal enemies and started a civil war. The Life of Chuck shows the ordinary events of a man's life and how they shaped who he is, while it also explores the themes of love, loss, and mortality. So what about that third driver, theme? Theme answers the question, why should the reader care? What does this mean for me, for all of us? It plays on universal human values and makes the reader see his or her own world differently. It is the most difficult art to master, but those stories with well-done themes have the most longevity. Unfortunately, theme cannot be worked in the plotting phase. Trying to do so makes the story sound preachy. theme is something that gets honed in the second and third draft phase. If you continue through my course, through the editing phase, I'll have some exercises for you to clarify your theme. Next time, we'll talk about making your main character seem real by making them well-rounded. Then we'll talk about their goals, motivations, conflict, and briefly we'll touch on support characters. I'll be back with another video in just a few days.